Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Duru from Ahan Analytics. Look, I came across a video that used the two income or the dual income trap concept to suggest that you're going to be worse off with having two incomes in your household, and then use that as a lead up to basically giving simple financial advice that should be well recognized by anyone in the personal finance space. I decided that I wanted to put together a response without calling out that video because that's not really my point. My point is to show how easy it is to use the AI tools now to become a critical consumer of content that you find on the internet. So I pulled up Notebook LM, and you can find my notebook down in the captions or in the description if you want to take a look at everything I put together. And I connected in that video. And then I asked the deep research to come up with counter arguments for that video, particularly on the two or dual income household trap concept. And of course, it came up with all sorts of research that both supported and refuted the concepts and had data, all sorts of alternative ways of looking at the data. Great stuff, came with a summary, it was convincing, it was on point. So I said, okay, let's create that video. So what you're about to see is Notebook LM's rendering with some of my instructions of that video that basically takes a more critical look at the concept of going broke with two incomes in a household versus just having one, and then leads up into the basic advice. Look, the basic personal finance advice is going to be the same almost no matter what your household looks like or what the economy or how the economy is structured. Save for short-term buffers. Invest for long-term wealth and security. Budget so that your spending is focused on absolute necessities and that you manage your aspirations according to your values. And I can't judge those values. That's up to you to determine. And then finally, minimize debt as much as possible. If you put those four things together, you're going to do okay. You're going to do all right. Of course, life happens, and we just try to manage the best that we can. All right, let's take a look at that video. Remember, AI created this thing with some of my instructions. So if you're watching closely, you'll notice some funny glitches and things, but just try to roll with it. Again, my point is just showing you how to use a very simple tool to critically consume content that you find on the internet. All right, let's roll them and take a look.
All right, let's talk about something that so many of us feel, deep in our bones. It's this paradox, this feeling that even with two people in the household working, families feel like they're walking a financial tightrope. It's been called the two-income trap, and today we're going to break down what it is, whether it's the whole story, and most importantly, what it means for you.
I mean, does this question just hit you right where you live? You look at the pay stubs, you see the numbers are bigger than what your parents ever made, but that feeling of financial security, that breathing room, it just doesn't seem to be there. It's this really common sense of fragility, and that's the puzzle we are diving into right now.
Okay, let's really get into this. Look at this comparison. It's like a tale of two families. You've got your classic 1970s single-income household. Yeah, their total income was lower, for sure. But then look at today's two-income family. They're earning a whopping 75% more, even after you adjust for inflation. But here's the catch. Their fixed costs, we're talking the mortgage, the childcare, the car payments, they are sky high. And that old school family, they had a built-in safety net, a second adult who could go get a job if things went south. Today, with both parents already working, that safety net is just gone. So to really get a handle on this feeling, like you're on a financial treadmill that's going a little too fast, we've got to unpack the theory that gave it a name. So that brings us right to section 1. Let's explain this trap. So the theory, which comes from the book The Two-Income Trap, basically goes like this. When the second parent went into the workforce, it wasn't just this simple, happy income boost. It was a trade-off. The family traded its most valuable insurance policy, that stay-at-home parent who could jump into the job market in an emergency, for a bigger paycheck that, got eaten up almost immediately by new, much higher costs. So the whole argument isn't really about income, it's about risk. Now, the first thing people say, right? Oh, families are just buying too many lattes and giant TVs. But the research from the book just blows that idea right out of the water. Turns out, when you adjust for inflation, families today actually spend less on stuff like food, clothes, and appliances. Even the cost for each car is down by 20%. The problem isn't some big shopping spree on fun stuff. So, if it's not the lattes, where in the world is all that extra money going? Well, it's being completely swallowed by huge increases in the cost of the absolute must-haves. The theory argues that once families had two incomes, they could bid more for houses in safe neighborhoods with good schools. And that basically kicked off a bidding war for housing that sent prices through the roof. Then you throw in the now essential cost of childcare and ridiculously high health insurance, and poof, that second income just vanishes. Let's make this feel a bit more real. Let's talk about a story from the book, about a couple named Ruth Ann and James. They were doing everything you're supposed to do. They bought a starter house they could afford. Not some palace, but a solid home in a decent area. You know, they were building that stable, middle-class life. And then, disaster. A new big box store opens up nearby, and James's job disappears. Overnight. Just like that. Gone in a single day. No warning. This is exactly the kind of shock that can happen to literally anyone, but for a family with high fixed costs and both parents already working, it's a catastrophe just waiting to happen. And this, right here, is the trap in action. With every single dollar of their income already spoken for by the mortgage, the cars, the daycare, there was just no wiggle room. Zero. There was no one sitting on the sidelines ready to get a job and cushion the fall. They got overwhelmed so fast, and the life they had so carefully built just started to fall apart. It's a terrifying story, and it's the reality of the two-income trap.
Okay, that story is powerful. It really is. And it explains that anxiety so many of us feel. But is it the only story? Is there maybe another way to look at the last half century? And that brings us to section 2, a very different story, a story of growth.
This is the question that really challenges that whole idea of the trap. I mean, if our incomes are truly up, are we actually worse off? Or are we just maybe looking at the problem from the wrong angle?
Now, check out this number, 132%. According to a totally different analysis, this one from the Cato Institute, that's the real inflation-adjusted income growth for married couples with kids between 1968 and 2024. Let me say that again, 132%. That is not stagnation. That's a massive, massive increase in actual purchasing power.
And it's not just for one specific group either. The same research shows that the real median household income for everybody is up 73%. Even men, whose wages are often the poster child for stagnation, saw a 45% real income boost. So the critique here is that the whole stagnation narrative can sometimes depend on cherry-picking your start date, which can paint a much gloomier picture than what's really going on.
What about that classic story we've all heard, that we traded all our good, high-paying factory jobs for low-paying service jobs? Well, this data here kind of questions that too. If you look at the average hourly wages from the mid-60s all the way to today, they're pretty much the same, about $19 an hour in both sectors. So the idea that we just swapped good jobs for bad ones might be more of a myth than reality.
And this quote just sums up the whole counter-argument perfectly. From this point of view, the story of the last 50 years isn't about decline and traps, it's about massive prosperity and people moving up. It suggests that having two incomes hasn't made us poor, it's made us a whole lot richer, and it's let families climb to new economic heights.
Okay, so we have two very powerful and very different stories. One is about a dangerous trap. The other is about incredible growth. So, where does that leave you and me? That brings us to our final section, how to take these two ideas and actually build your own safety net.
So here it is, the big takeaway. Both of these stories can be true at the same time. The data is pretty clear that real incomes have gone up, a lot. But that feeling of being at higher risk is also very, very real. The problem isn't that having two incomes makes you worse off. It absolutely doesn't. The problem is that the structure of our expenses has totally changed, and it's made us way more fragile. The rules of the game have changed, so we have to change how we play it. And you know where the solution comes from? It's pretty surprising. It's from the authors of the two-income trap themselves. They don't say, stop buying coffee. They say, focus on the big stuff, your fixed costs. The real way to manage this higher risk isn't about cutting out your small joys. It's about getting a handle on your huge, long-term financial promises. So how do you actually do that? You run a financial fire drill. First things first, ask the really tough question. Could we survive, even for a little while, on just one of our incomes? If the answer is no, your fixed costs are probably too high. Second, you have to build a cash buffer. An emergency fund is non-negotiable in this economy. Third, invest for the long haul to build real wealth. And finally, cut down on long-term debt whenever you can. A 3-year car loan is a heck of a lot safer than a 7-year one. And here's the best part, the most empowering part of all of this. These principles, they work for everybody. It doesn't matter if you have one income or two. It doesn't matter if the economy is great or terrible. Focusing on your fixed costs, saving for emergencies, investing for your future, and keeping debt low, that is the timeless blueprint for financial security. So as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with this question. Forget all the big economic debates for just a minute and focus on what you can actually control. Looking at those principles, what is the very first concrete step you can take starting today to build your family's safety net and turn that feeling of fragility into a feeling of real strength?